Right, so today I'm going to break down the cheese owl. Basically, it's just a filthy, nasty drum and bass lead sound that I've made in Serum 2, and was a fun one to make. I'll let you hear what it sounds like first. So you can imagine it perhaps in a beat. This is just a very simple beat here, but you know. I like this sound though. I think it's got quite a lot of character. I feel like I'm getting slightly better with Serum as I go on. This one, I've not used the granular generator. I've just done two very basic wavetables. But let's break down the sound design and quickly switch off our effects here. And yeah, we're going to talk firstly about the oscillator section. So how I started to make it was basically, as I mentioned, I picked two oscillators only. We've got a saw wave and we've got it's almost a square wave, but it's a sort of more of a pulse. Okay, so it's just, they're both on the default shapes. This one's just over the wavetable position number 6, and the first one is number 1, just the normal saw wave. The saw wave is how do I say? Yeah, it's at 0, so that's a slightly higher octave than the square wave, which is down at -1. Okay, saw wave at 0, pulsy square at -1. Randomization off on both. That's pretty much this section. We've got unison only on the square wave here on the right. Just 3 voices. Get that nice and wide, but keeping the saw wave down the middle. Then we've got basically a couple of movements happening, or should I say even routings happening. Yeah, so for the routing, I've done some phase distortion from oscillator A into B, but this is a very, very subtle one here, this 33%. It gets quite extreme when you go up high. But I just put on a little bit of that. Honestly, it's a small detail, that one. But the flip mode here makes a fairly large difference. And that's not actually an FM, that's just shaping the actual wavetable, you know? So just putting this kind of movement into it, because I'm putting an LFO onto the flip. So just changes the shape a little bit, but we're still mostly fairly powerful saw wave and square wave together, you know. The main movement is really going to come when I add on the filter. All right, so let's do that next, because for lead sounds I always typically think about bandpass filtering it. That's just how my mind works. Like lead sound, okay, bandpass filter. I like those kind of leads. I feel like they're pretty straightforward to make. So yeah, this band's 24 and the cutoff is set in the middle at 117, but it obviously goes down almost to 0 and then up, you know, quite high to sort of around 2 o'clock here or so. The drive nice and high, about 25%, and the movement then, it's not actually a classic as you would expect LFO movement. That would be how it would sound if I hadn't modulated the phase of the LFO. But I have. So on the secondary LFO here, we've got the rate set a bit slower, 1/2. And when it jumps up here on this second part, it basically causes the rhythm to skip a little bit on this first LFO. So it kind of like restarts quicker than it should, you know. And that's just me toying around with routing one LFO into another one to try and get a happy accident going with a nicer rhythm. And so it's quite a simple one, you know. You could kind of draw this in if you wanted to, like 2 wubs at slightly different timings. That would be similar result really. But that's just how I chanced upon this particular rhythm. Although simple rhythm, I quite liked it still, you know. So anyway, next, before we move over to the effects, we've got to add in some noise. And this follows my LFO rhythm as well, so LFO1 tracked to the level of the noise here. Got the cymbal bleed, or whatever that one's called, cymbal mic bleed. Okay, and that's the basis for the sound, but now we got to get more interesting with it, and so this is where I stepped in with adding another filter, and this one's a notch one. And I routed the first filter into the second one. And so obviously you do that over here, selecting the output to filter 2. And then filter 2, it's coming in from filter 1. I mean, that's the output really, so I've just messed it up completely. So that little button is where it's going next, you know. So filter 2, when it's done its thing, it goes to M, which is main, which is in the FX section over here, right? But yeah, the notch filter, left it down low around 34 Hertz, and it goes up 21% or so. Too much movement there, and it kind of loses a lot of its power. But here I capture the kind of low mid-range expression of the sound, driving that up 26%, and then yeah, essentially it's basically taken the whole premise and idea of what I started with, but shaped it, you know. So it's sort of cut off the fat a little bit, you know. Yeah, if you can kind of listen to the difference, basically it's just enhanced the main expression that the sound was trying to go for, and I've just sort of used the notch to cut around the edges almost to like focus in on that tonality that was already being created. Okay, all right. Next, then we can jump over to the effects. And so this is quite a short tutorial today because that section was relatively easy. But yeah, let's start at the top, sure, that makes sense. Hyper dimension, this time just the dimension mode on, 20% or so, 12% on the size. I'm doing what I usually do in like phase plant sound design, for example. I stack lots of effects in small amounts to slowly get closer and closer to my goal of a big fat sound, you know. Let's turn the chorus on, that'll help. Just around 17% for the chorus, so slowly adding a bit more width here and there. Delay is really important in this sound, so I've used it at 21%. But you definitely hear those delayed tails, and they're really needed for this lead, you know, because it's a little bit boring with just the LFO going wum 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 wum. So I need those tails to fill the gap a bit. Obviously, you could make it a bit more subtle, but I would always have them in there a little bit, you know. But I'm going to leave them quite over the top and high on this example. And for the timings, I love to do the ping pong. So the left and right are different. And I love to do them by the millisecond almost, you know, sort of off the grid. Because then you can kind of inject a bit more feeling and realism into it when you do it off the grid. So I love to do delays like that. Convolver next. I love this preset, the digital gated. Obviously you saw when I went up quite high, it was actually too much. Actually sounds great, about 16%. Really nice extra harmonics to the width of the sound. The low-high splitter, again, probably my favourite part. And again, not ever really sure which distortion mode to use, but the diode one seems to work fairly well, quite a lot of the time. So that really leveled up the sound a lot, you know. So I've split the bands just over 1K, and I'm driving up the diode almost starting at 60%, but mixed in at 40%, so a parallel distortion, and then actually modulating the amount of drive all the way up to pretty much 100 on the LFO, so it's kind of going in line with my rhythm, so nice and dynamic there. Alright, just two more things. A cheeky filter, it's kind of like a notch filter a little bit, but it's more just a little dip, nothing too like dramatic. But yeah, that one, that really adds to the whole vibe again. It's similar to what I did with the first notch filter. It basically takes the whole growl and the essence and the idea of the sound and just amplifies the part that wants to be amplified. So sort of sculpting out those frequencies a little bit out of the way that don't need to be there, and thus enhancing the ones that we actually like. So driving that up just a little bit, 10%. Yeah, mixes on all the way on that again. And then finally, a touch of equalizer. I think I just boosted the high end a bit here, a little high shelf boost to finish. Just about 1k and upwards, 2 dB or so. Just make it a bit brighter and louder in the mix, because it kind of still, yeah, it still had a bit of space to go a bit higher, you know. But yeah, there's a nasty, like, maybe neuro-y, dance floor-y, neurofunk kind of drum and bass lead sound called the Cheese Owl, because I went to the shopping mall here in Bangkok, and there was a restaurant called Cheese Owl, and they had a buffet, and they had either the Diamond Buffet or the what was the other one, Platinum Buffet for Cheese Owl, and I was like, what is this? What Cheese Owl, what? But I thought it was quite hilarious. So anyway, that was in my brain, and then that's how I named the preset. Alright, that's enough from me today. So it'd be great to couple up that lead sound with some other patches as well, like a bass underneath it or something like that, you know. Either way, we're cracking on with Serum. I'm getting slowly a little bit better each time, putting in the hours, making a lot of terrible presets that I'm not going to show you, but trying to make ones that I feel like are worth demonstrating. And I really like this one, and it's a little bit different to the basses I've made in previous videos. Anyway, enough rambling, that's it from me today. More from me soon. May I remind you as well, if you want any mixing and mastering work done, best way to do that is to email me for a quote, info@artifactmusic.com. Downstairs you can also find links to book production lessons with me, and also you can find links to my preset packs for Vital and Phase Plant and more. Alright, that's it from me today. More from me soon. Much love.